Hinduism has the reincarnation motif that everyone, once they die, their soul is reincarnated. It comes back in the meat again in some other body. And for the Buddha, the best thing to do is to completely be unattached to things so that at the final death of the last body, your soul escapes being reincarnated back into another body. Because all existence is miserable. Everything is hateful. It's all suffering. And the only escape from it is that gradual lack of attachment to things. So this is the philosophy that Schopenhauer is aware of and essentially adopts. And so the nature of life is such that you're going to be screwed. No matter what your plans are, you're going to be. That's kind of like that Burns poem, the best laid plans of mice and men oft go astray. There's not much any of us can do. And so this is the focus of the will, or the power. The power is this constant nature that is going to destroy your hopes. And so it's a very depressing philosophy. Not only was Nietzsche impressed by this, Richard Wagner, the composer. How many folks have heard of Richard Wagner? Ein? Zwei? Drei. Okay. So Richard Wagner, who is he? Obviously, composer, starts off with kind of basic German, Rienzi, some symphonies, things of that sort. Very typical of the time, but he comes up with an idea called a lead motif, which establishes a melody attached to a particular object, so that if you hear that melody associated with that particular object. And he begins writing operas that make use of this, and they become more and more dramatic and become absolutely impressive. People still find his operas absolutely amazing, and there are Wagner festivals all over the world, well, at least where they have orchestras, and there's an opera house in Germany at Bayreuth that Wagner built himself, according to his specifications, in order to play or perform his operas. And they had, amazing stage abilities, the way the stage could rotate and all kinds of things. Basic auditorium, though, everything is made out of wood, so it's like you're inside a cello. But in any case, Bayreuth is where this festival is held every year, Wagner Festival. By the way, if you want to get tickets, it takes you roughly 5 years to get in line to buy them. They're always so packed with people. It's like one of the main social events in Europe. And the operas are based on a German or Norse mythology. And the mythology is of Wotan, the god, the head of the gods, and his desire for power, and he's attracted to a ring, a magic ring that's built by a dwarf, which, by the way, if you're a connoisseur of the operas, it certainly seems like the dwarves are Jewish. They're caricatures of Jewish people, and that's a clearly anti-Semitic issue. By the way, it was Wagner that was Hitler's favorite, and so he went to the one opera, which is a 6-hour-long opera, 100 times. He was proud of that he went and saw that opera 100 times. And by the way, lots of things in the World War II battles were named by Hitler after Wagner's characters, so like the Siegfried line. Siegfried is one of the main characters in the operas. he also, Hitler wanted to die the way Siegfried died, basically. And that was, well, he was buried, not buried, but instead burned on a funeral pyre. And so, of course, if you're familiar with Hitler's death at his own hand, by the way, he shot himself. He and his wife, Eva Braun, were put in a pile up above the underground tunnels in Berlin. Just remember, they were at war, and the Russians were approaching, so they were put together in a pile, and gasoline was poured on them, and they were set on fire. So by the time the Russians got there, there were no signs left of Hitler. They couldn't find him and do anything. But the main theme of the opera is that Wotan wants this power, and he's frustrated by fate, and ends up with the gods being totally destroyed. And so it's the end of Godkind, and it becomes the new era of men. And if you're familiar with the movie and the books by J.R.R. Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, you notice a lot of similarities. The main being the ring of power, and the kind of thing that ring enabled you to do, etc. So if you're interested, we can discuss all kinds of things about that. The one problem, of course, with a lot of the fans of Richard Wagner is that they seem to be Nazis. So if you go to the Seattle Wagner Festival, my friend, I have never been to it, but my one friend went to it one year, and he said, they're all Nazis. You know, everybody in the audience. Interesting point of view. In any case, Wagner was fascinated by Schopenhauer, as was Nietzsche. So you've got this connection between Schopenhauer, Wagner, and Nietzsche. And Nietzsche is absolutely fascinated with Wagner, becomes a friend for at least 4 to 6 years, and his first writings are all about Wagner. And he's absolutely thrilled with Wagner. But then Wagner writes his last opera, which is Parsifal, and Parsifal is a 6-hour-long opera. Let me give you a dose of some of the opera here. This is not Parsifal, this is Siegfried. As you can't see, Siegfried is about to make his sword. His father's sword, Nothung, which means needful, had been broken by Wotan. Wotan made the sword, gave it to Siegfried's father, Sigmund, but then had to kill Sigmund, and so broke the sword. Siegfried is now going to reform the sword and weld it, or smithy it together again. Anyway, this is in German. Mein Vater, that's my father. Let me get him actually banging away at the sword here. Shoot, that's Wotan. know, I actually have the... This is not working very well. Here we go. This is a really boring thing to do, isn't it? It's listening to German music that you don't know. Okay, so I'll quit it. But that banging is something that art critics hated because incorporating the hammer on the anvil with the sword as part of the music. And the critics absolutely thought that's absolutely horrible. You can't use hammers on it. But the people loved it. Hitler loved it, for example. But Parsifal annoyed the heck out of Nietzsche because Parsifal is the father of Lohengrin, and Parsifal is the one who has the Holy Grail. Remember the cup that Jesus used at the Last Supper? It's a special cup. It has great powers, and in fact, according to this myth, it's being guarded by the knights. And the knights are all subservient to Parsifal, who is the king of the castle where this cup is protected. And so Parsifal is almost like a mass, like a Roman Catholic mass. And it's 6 hours long. There's a scene where everyone comes in homage to the cup and shares a drink from the cup so that they can all absorb this power from the cup, which was the cup that Jesus used and instituted the Holy Eucharist with. In any case, Nietzsche was horrified because this meditation, this 6 hour long meditation on Christianity, was exactly the opposite of what Nietzsche came to respect as the best religion. In his studies, Nietzsche came to focus on the Greeks. And he found that the Greek religion, and remember at the very beginning of the course, I discussed Achilles and what made Achilles considered to be practically a god among his followers, because he was such a big brute he could basically kill anybody he wanted. For Nietzsche, Christianity is a slave morality, because we are encouraged not to fight, not to oppose our enemies, but instead to turn the other cheek, at least if you interpret it that way. I mean, there's other interpretations, of course, but for Nietzsche, the interpretation that was considered Lutheran and correct was that when Jesus teaches you to turn the other cheek, he's not saying, "What? All right, make me." That's not what Jesus is doing. Instead, Jesus is being meek and humble and loving his enemy as himself, not going to hurt his enemy. Well, for Nietzsche, that is a slave morality, only for the weak. And for Nietzsche, the only ones that are really significant in life, the only humans that are really significant, are the ones that create value for themselves and not believe the values taught to them by society, by the religions of the day. Remember, he's a post-Hegelian, and Hegel impacted not only Marx, who thought that it's kind of like evolution of society, and the next stage will be communism, or Kierkegaard, who believed that the only reason that he would have faith